Ministry is a term we throw around a lot. But when is ministry not really ministry? Coming up next on Pastor Bob's Coffee Break. I am blessed to be a blessing. Drinking some blessed Headbangers Brew this morning. Our very own coffee in ground, whole bean, decaf, K-cups. We got it all. And again, the proceeds go to support the homeless ministry. That and our mugs. And this is one of our older mugs. And I always say this, but it's one of my favorites as well. I'm blessed to be a blessing. I want to talk about that today. That's good coffee. You can get it right here. wearemedalwearefamily.com. Dear Pastor Bob, my family and I were just asked to leave a church where we've been attending for several years. The church board decided to remodel the sanctuary, which didn't need it, and to add an addition to the fellowship hall, which is even now not at its full capacity. I suggested that we use the money to reach out to our community, to those who are on the streets and struggling. I've been called divisive, and it was suggested that I am coming against the ministry vision of the church. Rather than hearing me and opening this up for discussion, they rather saw me as a problem, and they dismissed me. What should I do? I would rather stay and fight. Totally understand. I totally understand. But what do you do in this situation? Really, what do you do? And how do you cope with ministry conflicts? And what is actually ministry? Well, you know, it's interesting. Jesus defined this kind of ministry right here in Matthew chapter 25, starting with verse 31. And I'm going to read today from the Living Translation, the New Living Translation. And it says, "But when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit upon his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered in his presence, and he will separate the people as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. And then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world.'" And then he describes them. Listen. "For I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was in prison, and you visited me." And then these righteous ones will reply, "Lord, when did we ever see you naked or feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality, or naked and give you clothing? And when did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will say, "I tell you the truth. When you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me." Now, why did they do it? Well, because they had a heart for it. They had a heart for those people, and they had a heart for this ministry. And he's simply telling them what they did, and they said, "Really? What are you talking about?" Because it was something that happened naturally as they had Christ inside and they began to care for people accordingly. Well, how about that? You know, most of the time when I see this verse quoted, it's telling us what we're supposed to be doing, but it's intrinsic. It happens as we begin to serve the Lord and His Spirit begins to guide us. It's an important distinction. And when a church becomes very internal, and when they become, building happy, and there's nothing wrong with building a building as long as there's a foundation biblically, spiritually, and as long as there's more going on than just that. A lot of churches have all of these huge expenses, and then they have 2, maybe 3% of the money that comes in that actually goes to what they call missions. I think it ought to be the other way around. Most pastors say, well, how would you ever run a church if you spent 90% on missions? I'd sure love to find out, wouldn't you? Because you see, I think that's the heart of the gospel, is just this. And missions doesn't mean supporting someone far away in a foreign country. Missions means looking past your own 4 walls and seeing people that are in need. He says, I tell you the truth, when you did this to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. When you respond like this, you're responding because of who you are. You are the sheep. You are the chosen ones. You are my followers. And my followers hear my voice and respond. That's what he's saying. So when is ministry not ministry? Basically, when it's going any other direction. And we know that God is leading in ministry when we begin to minister to people out of our hearts, not out of our pocketbooks necessarily, not out of any kind of structure, and we call it ministry, but when it's something that's intrinsic, when it's led by the Holy Spirit, and when we begin to care for people the way that Christ would care for them as well. That's an important distinction. And honestly, you said, should I just stay and fight? I don't know your situation. But if I were you, I would simply find a church that understands these principles. It doesn't sound like the one you're in is going towards that goal, as many churches don't. But the heart of a church is known for the way they love people, not just in the church, but the community and all around them. And that's an important distinction. Well, folks, don't forget, you are blessed. And you are blessed to be a blessing.